wish I had some tea. The perfect thing to have at this time. Just
That's what
sip
I
on some tea.
Some mint tea. That's what I had.
All right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for this important webinar on how all politics is local. Common slogan that's been spoken, and today that will be the topic of the discussion. We're grateful for having Brother Hussam Ayloush, the CAIR California CEO, with us here today to talk about politics in general, talk about local politics, and we're going to pick his brain a little bit to really understand, how we can strategically build power. Something that's been on our mind for a pretty long time. Before I start, I'll just do a brief intro into Muslim Visionaries, because I know people see Muslim Visionaries and they're like, what is Muslim Visionaries? In summation, we do two things or three things. Number one, we focus on training leaders, educating leaders, and giving them the tools to be strong in whatever positions that they're in. And that ranges in a number of different ways. Number two, we run a ton of media campaigns and digital campaigns to raise awareness at a local level to really reach people around issues that matter. And number three, we have a very clear focus on moving dollars away from foreign wars to our local communities. We have a big push to divest at all levels, from local communities, from the city councils to state positions to Congress, everything within our local community and Inland Empire. We really want to push people to take the money away from there and bring it back into our local communities. So with that, we have Brother Hussam, and I have I guess a more personal question to ask you before we dive into the topic. You've been in this space for a pretty long time, from the times of 9/11 to the times of Islamophobia and all these different things. If you had to look back at your entire career in this space, when would you describe the most difficult time as far as having to figure all of this out and navigate it?
All right. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. It's a great pleasure being with a group of, I can look at the names and mashallah, everybody here is somebody I've known personally, almost, I think everybody. And of course, our host, Muslim Visionaries, my dear brother, Dr. Arbaz, and Brother Hussam, mashallah, two respected community leaders and activists, well known in the community, mashallah. Thank you for doing this and continuing to organize and empower the community. Alhamdulillah. So to answer the question, I think that these have been some of the most difficult times for me, I would say, because many of the friendships and partnerships and alliances we've created over the years and developed and nurtured over the years suddenly failed us when it came to one of the most critical issues, and that is stopping a genocide, because the political price for that was too expensive, too high to pay for them. These are the same people who had been almost perfectly allied with us on so many other issues: immigration, civil rights, stopping hate, everything else. But suddenly, when it came to the issue of peace and freedom in Palestine, it was too high of an issue for them to deal with. And suddenly we felt betrayed by them. So, you don't get hurt when your foes, when the people you think are bigoted and people who you think support injustice betray you. You know that. It's not a betrayal. You expect them to do what they've always done. When you see APAC people, when you see right-wingers, when you see white nationalists refusing to even talk about a ceasefire, they've always demonized Muslims. They've always dehumanized Muslims, including Palestinians, Muslims and non-Muslims, of course. But when this comes from people who, until recently, we thought of them being champions of civil rights and human rights, it makes it difficult, because it makes you reorganize and regroup and reassess what is truly a partnership, what is truly somebody who is a champion of justice or human rights. And that has been difficult. Plus, adding to the fact that what makes it a little bit more difficult is that, so there is that unexpected betrayal, maybe we shouldn't be that surprised, but it is a bit surprising. Number two, the level of demoralization that has reached the Muslim community today also undermine our ability to push back against that betrayal. Because on one hand, you want to punish those who betrayed their values, or at least their professed values. And then you look around you and you see a Muslim community, for the most part, of course, not this group, mashallah. I know I'm preaching to the choir with this group, but many of the people we know in the community saying, I lost hope, I lost faith in this political system, it's all corrupt, etc. So it makes it a little bit harder for us to regroup and push back. And inshallah, we are at a stage where I think we're feeling now Muslims are regrouping.
Yeah, that's an important point. I think the apathy is real in the community. I think if the quote unquote enemy, if they want anything from us, is they want us to give up. They want us to just be tired and go back to doing nothing, essentially. And you hear a lot of that. You know, I saw a TikTok video the other day of some very popular people in the community that all of the family members took their ballots and they all threw it in the trash can. And
wrong message.
That's not the right message, because we're basically throwing away power in that sense. So you mentioned, the longevity of these relationships and all of these different things. When you look back in those years, perhaps when Islamophobia was a new term, when a lot of these things related to the Muslim community were new, was it easier getting particularly people on the Democratic side on board back then, or was it also a pushback to get them to support these Muslim projects, in a sense, and Muslim policies?
Yeah. To the credit of the Muslim community nationwide, and specifically in California, we've actually were able to build the power and exert that power and build the partnerships and alliances with so many elected officials. I mean, I hate to put it this way. I'm here representing CAIR, so I'm non-partisan. I would love to see that power exerted in every political party, within the Republicans, Democrats, Green, and whatever it takes. But the truth is, California is heavily a democratic state, blue state, progressive, liberal, diverse. So it was easier to do it here. So I think we've seen a lot of success within the democratic establishment. We saw a lot of Muslims around the country run for office and thrive and succeed, whether at a state level, a federal level, local level, in ways we haven't seen before. Of course, we're all familiar with Andre Carson, before that Keith Ellison, who later on ran for Attorney General in Minnesota, which in itself is an achievement, for an important state like that to elect somebody like him. Then we saw Rashida and Ilhan same year, and then locally we saw Aisha Wahab, we saw Bill Asaili, a Republican, might not agree with all his policies, but the fact that he's a Muslim and he was elected, it tells you Muslims were making a difference here. And in terms of alliances, yes, because our issues are not unique to our community. We'll talk about immigration, dignity for immigrants and migrants, dignity for all people, standing against bigotry, hate, discrimination. So these are not exclusively Muslim issues. So yes, we've made strides. We're able to push for anti-bullying policies and legislation around the country, including here in California. We were able to push for rights for Muslim inmates, rights for Muslim workers who work at the state level. I know from a CAIR perspective, it was not that difficult to, based on relationships and the hard work of the community, pushing at the local level, to meet with elected officials and draft these policies, making them, into legislations in the state of California and around the country. So yes, it wasn't difficult. I mean, this is a proof in itself that unless there is a big push against, we can do it because we have enough allies. The issue of Palestine is one issue where there is a convergence of evil forces. I would say that, yes, to use the word evil, because anybody who supports genocide or justifies it is evil. I know in politics they try to stay away from that, but it is evil. What else can you describe this such inhumanity? So you have the power of AIPAC, you have the power of Christian Zionists, you have the power of white nationalists, you have the power of pro-war people. So you have the power of all those who are Islamophobes, coming together, talking about decades of Islamophobia, anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian racism that has reached a point where these people who are dying are not seen as regular human beings. That therefore 17,000 Palestinian children killed is just an acceptable price to preserve Israel's existence and supremacy in the region as a bastion of a Western presence in the Middle East.
Yeah, so you mentioned something very important when you brought up Palestine in this case. So I know perhaps in the past you all have worked on issues related to Palestine, and there was a lot of pushback. I mean, even from the democratic forces. I mean, I don't know the entire history, but I've read parts of it where even Chuck Schumer was leading the campaign against many, Muslim organizations that were advocating for Palestine. What happened during that period when there was strong Palestinian advocacy, and then, you had to face all of that backlash, lawsuits, investigations, and then now, it put, I think, people in a different perspective after that phase.
Yep. Palestine is the issue where all politicians, for the most part, and both political parties leave their values, principles, claimed policies outside the door, basically. Because that's when they have no shame engaging in hypocrisy. Talk about human rights, talk about resistance to invasion in Ukraine, and then suddenly invasion is a good thing, occupation is a justifiable thing, resistance is good in Ukraine, resistance becomes terrorism in Palestine, human life is important, human refugees are important in Ukraine, then it becomes no, these are self-inflicted price of Palestinian terrorism, quote unquote, right? So, but I want to make sure, I say that has been the pattern in general, but I want to say things have changed even before the last year. There has been a growing rise in Muslim power around the country, to the point where I can tell you 25 years ago, I used to be kicked out of a meeting if I used the word Palestine. Like, I would sit in the meeting and I would say Palestine, and a politician would say, well, there's no such thing as Palestine, and unless you respect our rules here, you leave the meeting. And I would be, I would be kicked out of a meeting. You couldn't use the word apartheid when you describe what Israel is doing. Now it is normal. Now you hear it. You sit with politicians, with elected officials, with candidates. You get a whole range. Obviously, those that are ideologically pro-genocide, those are hopeless in a sense. But most of them are not ideologically pro-genocide. They're just conveniently pro-genocide because that's, AIPAC power, the fear of the AIPAC power. So for those ones, you will be surprised how many of them privately, and I would say the overwhelming majority, not a simple little majority, overwhelming majority of them, when you sit with them privately and none of their senior staff or staff are sitting with them, they would say things about, yes, what Israel is doing is illegal, is immoral, shame on them. My heart goes with the Palestinians. This is normal. I hear that. But they say, this is not my issue. I'm not going to lose my seat because of that. I wasn't elected for that, etc., etc. So that is there. Number two, there are enough of them. We have 30, 40 people pushing for a ceasefire in Congress. We had 130 members of Congress skipping on Mr. Genocide, Netanyahu, giving his joint address, speech in Congress. 130. And that's almost half. 128 of them are Democrats. So that's almost half of the Democratic Party. If you talk to Democrats now, surveys have shown and polls have shown anywhere from 75 to 78% of Democrats support a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire. Almost 60% of Democrats describe what Israel is doing in Palestine as a genocide. I mean, this is not a small number, and this didn't happen because suddenly people woke up to learn the truth. It's because of the amazing activism that has been done by so many people in our community and outside of the community, on social media, in person, rallying, vigils, protesting, driving trucks outside people's offices, right? All of that is extremely important, and that will take time to trickle up, I would say, meaning from the grassroots to the top leadership of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party itself is old school. Many of them have lived through, starting with Biden. He grew up with all these racist notions about Palestinians, all these racist notions about Muslims, and he lives it. He shows it. He can say anything he wants, but the proof is in the pudding, in what he says, what he does. And he can't humanize these people, Palestinians or Arabs or Muslims. And he grew up with this great myth of what Israel is, building a land for no people and for a people with no land. It was an empty and arid Palestine that these brave European settlers came and built out of nothing, etc., etc. So he lives that fake narrative, and he believes it. Now, come to the next level below that is also a lot of older Democrats who probably never went to school with a Muslim, never had a Muslim neighbor, never had a close Muslim friend, and who grew up as activists in the 80s, 70s, 90s, you name it. Democratic activists were the only ones who brought up the issue of the Middle East were Zionist Jewish activists. At that time, the non-Zionist or anti-Zionist Jewish activists were not large in number, the JVPs of the world. Muslim activists were probably barely seen. So they couldn't hear these things. They couldn't hear the truth. They will receive money from AIPAC and their supporters. Now things are changing, because now if you go to any meeting, to the convention, and I see Maha here joining us, a great example of what I'm saying, people who are respected in their field, young people grew up here, volunteered, paid their dues genuinely in helping the community and helping candidates. Now these candidates, other candidates, trust them, because people like Maha and others are not seen as outsiders. Or so newcomers. No, they're not. So when they speak, when they share an article, when they share a social media post, they say, oh, wow, now I'm learning. And that is changing the narrative. So what we need to do is continue the push. This is actually, we're there. We just need to push enough so that change within the grassroots trickle up to the politicians. The next city council member, the next mayor, the next assembly member is going to be one of those people who are now the grassroots activists. And trust me, no amount of lies coming from Fox News, CNN is going to change their mind now that they know what is happening. Once they've seen young Palestinian kids being slaughtered, once they've seen Palestinians being burned alive, once they've seen Israeli soldiers celebrate, laugh, and mock the killing of Palestinian women and children, you can't undo that. You can't unsee that, no matter what policy is pushed through you. So that's what I'm very hopeful that, yes, it has been difficult until maybe mid 2010, 2015, we started seeing change where now politicians, including at a leadership level, they talk about Palestinian state. They talk about the right of Palestinians to self-determination. These were not things you could say before. These were things you keep to yourself. You only talk about one thing, Israel's right to defend itself. That's it. Now, when people say that, they talk about, the right of Palestinians to self-determination, freedom, dignity, their own country, peace, security, etc.
One of the most common. I hear an echo.
Yeah, I'm hearing an echo too. I would say maybe the other. Yeah. Okay. Mute the other.
Yeah. One of the most common things that's happening right now in the community is that there's definitely a lot of divide. There's a lot of division right now within the Muslim community about who to vote for presidential election, and we have challenges. I think sometimes we become very harsh with just our fellow Muslims, which is a challenge. I'm all for talking about institutions, but I think with each other it becomes very difficult. But I think post-election, I think there'll be a reality check. Everyone's going to have either candidate, and then you have to go somewhere with the president, whoever's in power. Now, when you think about building power, let's just put a hypothetical scenario, right? Trump's in power or Kamala's in power. How do you navigate either, right? Let's just say for Trump, for example, how do you navigate that? What do you do to do that? Are Democrats going to be more awaken and they're going to come out and push more? Like, how do you even begin to think about it?
Sure. Again, I'm going to speak with, with my non-profit 501c3 hat. So I'm going to avoid being too political, too electoral in my talk. But the reality is this. Maybe fortunately, maybe not fortunately, we live in California. So don't cry too much about how you vote or what your vote would be. Vote what makes you feel good, because no matter what we do with that presidential vote, Kamala Harris is gonna win. So that's it. If I lived in Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, I would probably be worried about, and I will have to weigh in every factor, etc. What could happen? Who is the lesser of two evils, and who is? Yeah, alhamdulillah, we live in California. We have less of power, unfortunately, but the trade-off for that is that moral dilemma is resolved for us. So vote what you feel will make you sleep comfortable at night, knowing that you stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you say, you know what, I did not support racist people, genocidal people, etc., etc. That's my advice. You know best what your values are. Vote by your values. Now, but every other race is important for us, right? Like we have to do things. I mean, for me, not all being on the same page is okay. It's healthy. We're not the only community in America that is not agreeing on everything. This never happened in history. No community is always. Just keep civility. That's what. Don't doubt, second guess people's intentions. This is not the time to go and say, I know it all, and if you don't agree with me, you're a traitor. You are supporting. Listen to people and let people make their argument. I think there are some arguments that are stronger than the other, I would say. But what I've heard so far is not crazy arguments, right? Like nobody's saying, I don't care what happens to Palestinians, I'm going to support my favorite candidate because I'm a member of this party. If that's your allegiance, then yeah, you're not part of this community's debate. You're on your own. But that's not what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is people debating who is worse for us on a long term versus short term. Intelligent people can have different opinions and conclusions on that. Personally, I have my view. People know it. I'm not going to share it here because of, again, the nonprofit. But what I want to do is I want to look at beyond this election. 10 days to, less than 2 weeks from now, this election will be over. And if Trump wins, we have a whole set of challenges we're going to have to deal with. We all know them. We don't have to guess. There's no guessing involved. We had him as a president before. We know how he feels about the Muslim community. We know what he plans for Palestine. We know how he loves dictatorships. We know so there's no guessing. Just prepare for that, right? He's going to work, and it depends who runs and controls Congress. If it's the Republican Party, then he has a slam dunk. Basically, they want to pass bills that will restrict the rights of students. They want to punish students. They want to deport students who are not U.S. citizens if they dare to speak up for Palestine. He wants to shut down Muslim organizations that speaks in solidarity with Gaza and so on. So we know if Harris wins, again, there's no need to guess much. We know what she's been doing. She's doing it as we speak, right? We are prepared for a continuation of the same shameful, again, policies that we witnessed, which is, talking from both sides of your mouth. Hey, we hope for a ceasefire while supplying Israel with the deadliest baby-killing weapons that you could imagine. 2-ton bombs have no military use whatsoever. The U.S. knows very well when we send 2-ton bombs to Israel, it will use them to kill Palestinian children and women. It's a known fact. There's no guessing. Gaza is not a battlefield. There's no battlefield. There are residential areas or whatever is left from those residential areas. So this administration is not just Biden, it's Biden and Harris. And the truth is, she has talked about, she has almost shedded tears about Palestinians being killed as if it's some hurricane passing by. We don't know who's killing them, without mentioning who's killing them, and insisting at the same time that we stand with unwavering support for Israel. So the point I'm making is one of these two is going to be a president after November 5th. Maybe it takes a week to finally count all the numbers. But the reality is one of them is going to be president. So we know what to deal with, regardless how we vote, at least for us in California. So it doesn't matter. Don't sweat it up, sweat off the issue of, oh my God, we know what's going to happen. What is more important is for us is not just voting on that day. It's important because there are a lot of other races that are dependent on us today. Congressional, state, Senate, state assembly, mayors, council members, people who stood for a ceasefire, people who stood for the humanity of Muslims and Arabs and Palestinians. We cannot let them down as a community. We have to stand by these people, stand by those who stand for human rights, for human dignity. But more important than that even is what we do after that. When do we start flexing our power, developing this power, reorganizing, reconnecting as a community? We debated, that's fine. But what do we do for 2026 and 2028 elections? That is where we're 1 million people in California. There are 1 million Muslims in California. We are we're present in the most critical districts in California. Yes, California is a blue state, but let me tell you, so many districts are in their own way swing districts. How is that? Even Democratic districts, who makes it during the primary, we can make that becomes a swing election, because our vote in any district, we can have anywhere from 5 to 15,000 Muslim voters in these districts, sometimes even more. If we can get 10, 15,000 Muslims, I can tell you we can decide who will win the primary in many of these elections, if not the general election. So that is where we have to look at ourselves. Others see the power of the Muslim community. Unfortunately, we don't see it.
One question just to follow up on what you just mentioned, then I'll bring in Maha to get a little bit deeper into the races. I think at a national level, the presidential level, there's definitely that moral dilemma that we're facing, right? We have to navigate that. But some of that is trickling down into the local races, right? And we know most of the local races, you don't have the third party in most races. I haven't seen any other parties besides Democrat and Republicans on in most races. So there is a moral dilemma there, and you're looking at two candidates, and perhaps, one candidate is AIPAC backed, another candidate is not AIPAC backed. Perhaps they're not giving enough on ceasefire. Maybe perhaps they're not saying all the things, but you do have to some extent navigate the lesser of two evils, or just not even think about voting and just give up your power. So how do you navigate that, and how do you think about long-term change when it comes to down, in these other races?
I'm so glad, Akhi Arbaz, you asked that question. I think honestly, this is probably the most important question that should be on every Muslim's mind, every Muslim voter's mind. And I hope every eligible Muslim to vote is a Muslim voter, because we cannot afford, when we get the list of Muslim voters and we share it with elected officials, and by the way, they have those lists. They have the list of Latino voters in their district, Muslim voters. When they have the list of eligible voters and it shows that you didn't vote, they can't see how you voted, but they can see how regularly you have voted. And when we look like we're not voting, they don't pay attention to us. So please, everybody, make sure you register to vote. Even if you missed the deadline of the online registration, you can register to vote on the day of election at your polling station. But back to your question. If I can tell you how many times I've heard people say, very sincere, beloved Muslims, saying, I'm sick and tired of, I'm no longer doing this lesser of two evil thing. I'm no longer, I tell you how many times I'll lose my mind when I hear that. Political engagement is nothing but choosing the lesser of two evils. From an Islamic perspective, it's a concept in our Islamic tradition. It's, called dar'ul mafasid, pushing away harm, wa jalbul masalih, bringing in good. This is a fiqh issue that is over 1,000-year-old in Islamic engagement. So social, political engagement. Everything you do in life is truly not black and white. Most of what we do in life is about gray. And that gray is, do your best to push as much of harm as possible and bring as much as good as possible. You are rarely going to have good versus evil running for office, unless Umar ibn al-Khattab and Ali ibn Abi Talib come back and run for office, right? Then you're not going to have them. You're having people with flaws, some with good intentions, some with bad intentions. It is your job as a thinking Muslim who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to look at the person who will cause less harm to people and will bring more good. Everything we do in politics is about that, choosing the lesser of two evils. The problem that people say sometimes, and that is true, sometimes, like some people say, I can't say that, I'm, 501c3. Some people say, currently, when I look at the leading candidates for president, I truly, genuinely cannot tell who is the lesser of two evils, right? And that happens. It could be at a local race for city council. Yes, at that point, don't vote maybe for that specific race, right? Like if it ever gets to the point where I have candidate A and candidate B both running for my local city mayor, and I can't really tell, both are evil, both are bigoted, both are hateful, then maybe skip that one. Great. There are another 100 races to vote for, maybe dozens, not hundreds. But so yes, please let's not become idealistic, utopian in the way we look at affairs and current affairs of people in solving problems. As an imam, as a leader, as a judge, as a thinker, as a philosopher, as a political activist, everything you do, as a parent, as a husband, as a wife, everything you do every day in your life is trying to minimize harm and maximize goodness. You rarely are stuck with the choices of, utopian goodness and satanic evil. It's, usually everywhere in between. I hope I didn't confuse people, but
I think that's definitely a powerful point. And I think one thing just to add on is that, in most of these races, if Muslim leadership meet with them or request a meeting, you can have conversations with some people and they would consider policies and they'll vote on some, and others will not even take a meeting most of the time, and there's no interest at all, right? I think there's some clarity there, but I think, just to close that point, I guess, the point of thinking long term, right? Perhaps, some of these races you don't get everything you want now, but in the future, you definitely can keep moving down the road, right? If there's a seat that's funded by AIPAC and it's not funded by AIPAC in the future, the goal is to keep pushing on that individual to get them where we want to go.
Yeah, very quickly to conclude, I'd say nothing is constant and permanent in life except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing, not us, not the community, not politicians, not Congress. Everything changes. It is up to us to make the change positive, upward, or negative, downward. It really is. If we abstain, if we self-marginalize, which is the dream of AIPAC and the Islamophobes and white nationalists, then we cannot complain about things changing in a downward, in a bad way. But if we put the effort, we've seen it in every city, every county, every state, where Muslims put their heads together, their energy together, we've seen the change going positively. Sometimes in some areas, change happens within 2 years, 3 years, sometimes takes 5 years, but even people, sometimes you replace bad people with better people. Sometimes that bad person, because of good relationships and good engagement, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ عَدَاوَةٌ كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ. The famous verse, ادفع بالتي أحسن. Push evil with goodness. I'm not saying be naive. Some people you want to push them harshly with election, get them out. But some people are just ignorant, and engaging with them and showing them our strength and our goodness have made, it chips away from their wrong and harm. And then some of the people I can tell you now who are standing with us only 5 years ago were people who wouldn't meet with us. You mentioned Schumer, by the way. Schumer is somebody who changed. I'm not saying he's pro-Palestinian now, but he's not the same Schumer who was 5 years ago, let alone 10 and plus years ago. Now, he's attacked by AIPAC. He's criticized by some AIPAC people because of some of the things he has said, as an example. And he is the least of the good ones who have changed in a way. Like there are many other and better examples.
And I know that I mentioned that was the last question, but I want just from your quick experience, I know you mentioned to me this in the past. There's been people that you have perhaps opposed and were aggressively against, and you had to meet with them again, and you constantly you have this battle where someone's your enemy one day, and the next day you have to meet with them, work them on policy, and then the cycle continues, right?
Absolutely. That happened to me this Sunday, Thursday, past Thursday. Somebody I blasted, a member of Congress, I blasted, publicly on social media for his shameful position on Palestine and the ceasefire. And I ran into him at some event, and we shook hands and we talked about some other issues that are important, dealing with immigration locally. It doesn't mean you're betraying your values. What it means, they say in politics, there are no permanent enemies and no permanent friends or allies. There are permanent interests. And the interests for me are the interests of my community, the interests of justice, the interests of human rights. So anyone who comes closer to me, one step to advance justice and human rights, I'm going to meet with them. It doesn't mean I will be silent on the other issues. I will continue to criticize them on the other issues. And if I get a chance to replace them as a community activist, not as CAIR, through election, I will do it. But until then, they're in Congress. There are 435 members of the House and 100 members of the Senate. They are the ones who pass policies. Me being on the street alone or making dua in my masjid or my, at night in my home is not enough going to change things. I need to engage them. I need to engage the community, build the power, vote, etc., to bring that change, in addition to the important aspect of protesting and making dua and everything else.
Really appreciate your time, Brother Hussam. Jazakallah khair for joining us. I know I have hundreds of questions to keep asking if I could one day, but for now, we've spent a good time together, and inshallah, I'm going to kick it off to the other Hussam to talk to Maha about the various races.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a real pleasure and honor to be with you, and mashallah, dedicated and inspirational activist. I wish every area can develop individuals like both of you and the team with you, mashallah. You bring us a lot of pride, alhamdulillah.
Thank you, Hussam. Fantastic talk. We all benefited from it tremendously. And as Hussam previously mentioned, he is here with CAIR. It's 501c3, so he can't really get into any of the nitty-gritty regarding specific races. But alhamdulillah, we're blessed to have Maher Rizvi with us here, who is very active in this space and has been leading some campaigns locally. And I'd love to get your insight in particular to one race here, because as Hussam kind of mentioned, whether we like it or not, often we are deciding between the lesser of two evils. But in Corona, for example, and I believe that's District 41, if I'm not mistaken, we have two people running: the Republican incumbent Ken Calvert, who has accepted I think 500 or 700K from AIPAC, and really hasn't been a friend of the Islamic community. And if I'm not mistaken, he's literally refused to meet any Muslims. And running against him is Will Rollins, a Democrat who the Muslim community has been trying to meet for quite a while, and he has been silent. However, just a few weeks ago, he has met with some CAIR folks, and he's also met with a Palestinian Christian group. Again, he changes stance slightly to at least allow a meeting. And following the meeting, he did issue a statement on his website, kind of a lukewarm, in my opinion, 1 year late, calling for a ceasefire, the blanket statement we've seen. Mm-hmm. Now, as such, CAIR-Action has endorsed Will Rollins and suggested for community members to vote Will Rollins. And initially in our community, when some people heard that, they were not necessarily fans of that, being that they have tried to meet with Rollins and discuss with him, and they have a hard time changing their views regarding that. So I'd just like to get your real life experience on how our community should navigate this when we have a race such as these two, which is pretty tight.
Yeah. Okay, assalamualaikum everyone. Thank you, Erbaz and Hussam, for having me. So my name is Maha. I'm very involved with local politics. It's my life. And I'm blessed that I could represent our community in these spaces. I work for an elected official for the state government, but I'm also the regional director for the California Democratic Party, which is definitely hard because with how, especially after this whole everything that's going on, for calling for a ceasefire, and that's the work that we've been doing, is to push our party, push our region. And so, yeah, the Will Rollins, we have the presidential race. It sucks. No matter what you say, we are in a no-winning situation. The House of Representatives is going to be won by a slight majority, and it goes through California. That it will. There are 5 races in California that can determine on what our Congress can look like, and having, even though Democrats aren't our favorite, having a Republican majority, especially if Trump be president, is scary. It is a scary thought. So it is going to be run through California, and Will Rollins is one of those districts that is going to determine how the House votes. They need to flip about 5 seats, and that's one of them. Will Rollins is not perfect. Ken Calvert is way worse. Way worse. He's been in office for 32 years. He's been in office since I've been alive. He has done nothing. There's 3 things. He's corrupt. He is only benefiting for himself. He does not care. He only shows up now because it's in a close election, but he also does not care about Muslims at all. He is, I think, one of the most corrupt congressmen, but also the most like anti-Islamic congressman. And it's unfortunate. It is unfortunate because he does have a big Muslim community here. But to him, it does not matter because we haven't voted. And he, of course, Ken Calvert is AIPAC funded. So he one of the highest AIPAC funded. So with him, we're not going to get anything. We are not going to get anything. We haven't got anything for 32 years, 2 years since he's been in office. There's been times where he's been close, but this is the closest race that he's ever been in. In the election 2 years ago, or Will Rollins came probably the closest that anyone has ever came in a off presidential election. He lost by the corrupt one's name is Ken Calvert. He is our current congressman. Oh my gosh, sorry. So he came 10,000 votes in the difference, and in that year, people don't turn out in non-presidential years. The turnout is way less. Republicans have an advantage because they vote every election, while we, Democrats, but also like our Muslim community, we just vote every 4 years in the presidential election. It's good that we voted this year, but we should be, as a community, voting in every election. But with Will Rollins, he's not perfect at all. You know, it is 1 year too late. But the fact that even though it took us a while, we have to push, right? But he took that step, even if it was close to election. He knows that he needs our community. And this election, this race, the numbers are so close that it can he can get elected this year, and then 2 years later he can get unelected. That happens in these swing races. So he has to work with our community because we are a big block of voters. In the primary, there was someone else who ran, and I think most of the Muslims voted for her. Anna, I can't remember her last name, but that was a big chunk of votes that were taken away from him. So he realizes that he needs us. He needs our votes, and maybe it's hard, right? But he has taken the step to talk to us. Even if it's not perfect. But sometimes that's what we gotta do. We have to push the needle slowly. I mean, we've seen, as we said, 2 years ago, all these congressional people who've called for a ceasefire, we wouldn't have seen this. It is the push that we do, and the push we not just do this election, but we do every election, non-election year, anytime. But we have to take a stand one way. With Ken Calvert, we're not gonna get anything. Like, we've seen that we're not gonna get anything. With Will Rollins, this is an opportunity for him to show us that, okay, we got your vote, now what? This is the time to do it. And so I think that it's a hard race. I know it, as Brother Hussam said, it is, you know, what is a lesser evil? But here it's what's a way lesser evil. And at least Will Rollins, even if he's not perfect, he's taken a small step, not the full step that we need, but it shows that he can be pushed or he can be talked to. And that's what we need to do. We need to take as many allies or close allies. He may not be an ally yet, but maybe he can be an ally in the future as he learns to navigate through this. Right now, that's, it's a hard race, but that's kind of where it is right now. And it's really close. It is really close. I mean, Will Rawlins has raised a lot of money, but so has Ken Calvert. This is one of the races that the Republican Party is like spending so much money. I mean, this is the district I live in. I have 10 mailers from, it's crazy. It is crazy, but it is so important.
Yeah, I've seen lots of commercials for both of them, and I'm in neither. I'm not in that district, but I'm getting commercials swinging both ways for them. So November 6th, let's say after the election, again, it's going to be one of the two. What recommendations, what suggestions, what advice do you have for our community regarding the engagement of, I hope in this case it will be Will Rawlins, because like you mentioned, it's close, and we do have the numbers, and with the endorsement, I'm hoping it will shift that way. But what would you tell our community regarding engaging with him? And the reason I ask is because he has meet and greets happening all the time. And I've reached out to some of my friends in the district to just go and, just be in the room, just say hi, introduce yourself as a Muslim. And to be honest, actually, none of them would entertain it. And it's just defeatist mentality. I think that Hussam kind of talked about early on about demobilizing because this continued apathy in the system. But again, we come back to November 6th, and let's say Rawlins is elected in. What advice would you give to our community? What suggestions? What should our community be doing to engage, to work with Rawlins?
So one thing about politics, which is not the best thing, but it is the most important thing, is it's all about relationships, the relationship with the people you build. And so when he's elected, the first thing is to set up the meeting, set up meetings, set up going to his events after, because there's going to be parties, there's going to be celebrations for his community when he's going to be sworn in, right? So those events are important for us to show face that we got you there. We are elected because you're elected because of us. So we can't just let that go once he's elected. We have to build a relationship, and we have to continue talking to him. For us, as like we're here very involved in politics, right? We built the relationships, and so they know that they'll see our face. But we need more people. We need our community to show up, because that's what AIPAC does. They show up. People know who their people are. They have those relationships. So we need to take that model and make it our own. And that's by building relationships. And yeah, as Yusuf said, we need to, you call him up as soon as he's elected. It won't be November 6th because this race is going to be so close. It will be called probably closer to the certification. So probably closer to December.
Oh,
because with California mail-in ballots, and that's what happened in the primary, or in 2022, that it was very close on the primary day or the actual election day, but by closer, it was a bigger gap. And so, but we build those relationships. We can't just relax after elections. It is an ongoing process. It's an ongoing that we have to continue building relationship and building our bench and our power. And we can't do it if we just say, okay, we're done. No, we haven't done anything to build our power. And so how can we be done when we haven't even done the work? We have to build the relationships. I was working in politics. I don't see people like us. And because we have this mentality, no, we need to show up, show out until we can't push no more. We have to keep on pushing.
And I think that's a very, very good advice, very good point. And an interesting thing about just building the relationship, it's also just familiarity, because an interesting thing with not only Will Rawlins, but others as well, when they meet Muslims, we're almost like a unicorn to them. They're really not used to meeting and interacting with us. But even when they meet Palestinians, they're really confused. And I'll give you an example with Will Rawlins. he did meet with a Palestinian Christian group, and then he also met with CAIR. And then he came back to the Palestinian Christian group and said, I've met with you guys, I've met with CAIR, and that's going to take care of you guys as well. And he was shocked to find out that not all Palestinians are Muslims. He was, again, dumbfounded that there were Palestinian Christians. And again, it's like a unicorn. They've never spoken to, a Palestinian Christian. They again assume that everyone's Muslim. But again, it's not only a knock on will, it's also others as well. Even
they're not educated on the issues that don't matter, that they're not fully concerned with, right? It's because if we're not telling them, how are they gonna learn? And vice versa, right? So we have to continue building. People learn and people understand better when they hear directly from the people who are affected. They can see all the propaganda, but if we're not in those spaces, we're not showing up, they don't know who to reach out to.
Yeah.
Right? So.
And another great example, as you mentioned, I was talking to somebody running for a seat here in Rancho. And I told him I'm a Muslim and I'm from the Rancho community, Rancho Muslim community. And his answer to me was like, "Oh, I've been to your temple in Fontana." And I said, "Actually, there's a mosque, 2 miles away from us here." But again, it's foreign territory to them. And as you mentioned, it really is ignorance. I don't think many of them have ill feelings or anything of this sort. They haven't been exposed to too much propaganda other than the Fox News. But really, it is ignorance. But it is incumbent, as you mentioned, upon us to really introduce ourselves and have them know who we are and what we're about. But I think most importantly, the takeaway is that's great advice pertaining to Rollins, but really, yeah, exactly. This really should extend to not only Rollins, but to every elected office coming down to even the state city chair, city council, the mayors,
school board, everything.
School board, everywhere across the board, because if we're not representing, Muslims or Islam, well, I mean, the only place they're going to get it from is Fox News, unfortunately,
exactly.
which a lot of them do. Any other last takeaways, Maha, that you would like to instill upon our community?
I think it's not easy work. It's long-term planning, long-term being strategic. But I think just your point is that when we show up, we educate. And when they're educated, they make better decisions. So it's work that we need to do. We need to put in. Because they're not gonna go to things that they don't know. And like working for a state elected, I've seen how powerful and how much lobbying the other side does, the AIPAC side does. And if we're not organized, then we can't complain because we're not doing the work. One of my favorite quotes that I use, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And that's how it's been for our Muslim community. We have to show up. We have to show up. We have to do work. And if you don't know what to do, reach out to us. We are in politics, but we can't do it alone. As much as we want to be the representative, community power is what makes the difference.
Thank you so much, Maha. It's great to have insight from people actually, on the political front lines. Your experience and your suggestions and your feedback. I mean, it's really invaluable. So I'd really like to thank you for joining us here and instilling us with some of that wisdom.
Thank you. And if I'm gonna put my email, if you have any questions on the political side, I work in San Bernardino and Riverside County and work with a lot of these elected officials and candidates. So I can provide any insight that you need that I couldn't answer today.
Thank you. And lastly, one thing I'd like to do here, I mentioned to you guys to go get your ballots. One of the goals here today, if you have not completed your ballot, is to go get your ballot. And this is really applicable for the IE. And we are going to work through it. It's only going to take 5 to 10 minutes max to work through your ballot. So I'm encouraging everyone to go get your ballot now. I'm going to share my screen, and we're just going to go through the ballot line by line of the relevant things here. And at the end of this, again, no more than 5 or 10 minutes, we will have a completed ballot ready for mailing, ready to be processed. Because again, as Maha and Hussam said, we need to increase our voter numbers. So with that, let me share my screen. And if you yes. Oh, I don't know how to unmute you. Oh.
Okay. I did want to mention, there's CAIR organization, but there's also CAIR Action PAC that's been doing a lot of great work too. So I think getting involved with them as well would be a good resource for you. Sorry, I just had to add that.
No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for having me. And again, anything I could do.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. Thank you for being with us. So again, go get your ballot. We're going to go through it. No more than 5 minutes. Okay. Oh, is my your screen? Is my screen being shared? I can't tell. Your screen sharing. Okay. 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 I think my screen's being shared. I actually can't tell if it's being shared. But okay, we're gonna go on. Let's see. Okay. Oh, screen is there. Okay, great. Oops. Okay. Again, so we're gonna go through this ballot real quick. Are we presentation mode? Okay. Sorry guys, this is new to me. Perfect. All right. And before I begin, I have to thank my daughter, Sanaga. She's my technical advisor who helped me put this thing together. So here's the ballot. I just opened it literally today. We're going to go through it. Here's the envelope. Okay. When we begin, most importantly, the methodology here, as Hussam and Maha mentioned, our goal here really is to increase turnout of votes in the Muslim community. And let me tell you why real quick. A practical example that I have myself here. We, and when I say we, a group of Muslims, Christians, and immigrant groups, we've been trying to meet with some of our local elected officials, and one of them, Norma Torres, we've been trying to meet, and for literally months, we've been trying to meet with her, if not almost a year, and she's continually refused to meet with us. And as such, we touched base with a political strategist one time, and he showed us why she is refusing to meet with us, and that's because the numbers in her district of Muslims who actually vote, it's just dreadfully low. I mean, the numbers they gave us were just really, in all honesty, pathetic. And as such, it makes no sense for her to meet with us because we don't vote. And I have to say, the data that they have access to is just mind blowing. To be honest, they can even hone in on a house. They can see who the husband voted for and who the wife voted for. So the amount of data they have is amazing, and they know whether we vote or not. And if we don't vote, they have no incentive to meet with us. So in Norma Torres' case, her campaign would literally email me back, and I can show you guys the email saying, you know what, thanks, but no thanks. We're not interested in meeting. And again, it comes back to our voter numbers. And so really our ultimate goal here is to increase our Muslim voters. And what we did here is basically we referenced the guides, as Maha mentioned. We have CAIR Action, who put out a guide, as well as American Muslim Task Force, as well as Vote for Peace, and a few other people who have put out guides. So we've referenced that, and we've also looked for candidates who are not accepting money from the Israeli lobby, AIPAC. And lastly, if we were on the fence with either this way or that way, we consulted with a bunch of our local organizers here and activists, and we're requesting that people vote for candidates who at least met, engaged, listened to the community. So that's kind of how we arrived here. So with that being said, let's come to the first ticket on the item. As you can tell, is a presidential race. And here again, we're not going to get into the nitty gritty of who you want to vote for, but I will say that CAIR Action, AMT, and 130 plus nationally recognized imams have endorsed the third party. So they're suggesting to vote for the third party. You'll see many claiming, Jill Stein has a very good chance of exceeding this 5% threshold, and they're as such requesting that people vote for Jill Stein. So we're gonna leave it at that. pick your third-party candidate of these four and circle it in with a blue or black pen on your ballot. Do that now. Now we're going to move on to the next ticket on the item here. The next, we have Senate, and we have a short and a full term for Senate. Now, as mentioned before, we're not fond of candidates who have accepted money from AIPAC, the Israeli lobby, and Adam Schiff, who's on this ballot, on this ticket, has accepted almost $6 million. That's trackable from the Israeli lobby. And in all reality, it's probably more. And as such, the recommendation here is not to vote for Adam Schiff because he is, a huge AIPAC recipient. His opponent, Republican Steve Garvey, he's a MAGA guy. He's, he pushes the Trump, Trump talking points and Trump claims. So here again, if you want to vote for Steve Garvey, go ahead. If you're not comfortable with Garvey, that's fine as well. But don't vote for Adam Schiff is what we're recommending here on the next two, and that's a full term and short term for Senate. Now we're going to move on. So pick it, fill it in. Again, blue or black pen. We're going to move on to Congress. So now, and this again is specific for the IE, we have several districts. We have 33, which is part of Rancho. We have 35, which is also part of Rancho, Ontario. 41 is down in the Corona, Elsinore area. We have 39, which is Riverside. 28, which is Rancho to Pasadena. And then lastly, we have 23, which is the Palm Springs or Redlands, Loma Linda, Palm Springs going east. So now here again, we look at, this beautiful flyer, which kind of emphasizes who we're saying not to vote for. For example, 33, we're saying not to vote for Pete Aguilar. Now, again, that only leaves one, Tom Herman. And I will have to say, we did meet with Tom Herman, and I would actually recommend that people do vote for him. He doesn't really have a good chance of winning. He's a Republican. He was about 12,000 behind in the primaries, but he has accepted zero from AIPAC. He's Republican, and he's not, he, as kind of mentioned with Meha, he's just kind of like a little ignorant on the issues, but willing to meet with us. Similarly, we come to District 35. Again, the suggestion here, it's not Norma Torres, and now that leaves Mike Cargile. Similarly, he's a Republican, but he's not as MAGA-ish. Here again, I would personally recommend, vote for Cargile in his district. Now, District 41, Calvert, I actually should have put, the endorsement here from CAIR-CA, and again, as we just kind of mentioned, is Will Rollins. So we would recommend not Calvert, but go with Will Rollins. District 39, Mark Takano, he's just been great. He's called for a ceasefire early on. He's continually meets and is interactive with our community. Great person. Let's continue to put our support behind him if you are in the Riverside area. Then also we have Judy Chu in District 28, which is part of Rancho. Again, going west. Similarly, she's put out a ceasefire statement early on. And then in 23, it is Derek Marshall that we are asking people to vote for. This is Congress. Now let's move on. We have state Senate districts where, let's see, the state Senate district, that's next in line. So of the different IE areas here, we have, like Rancho, 29, we're recommending Eloise Reyes, or, if you're in Riverside, Mariloma area, Sabrina Cervantes. Some of them, for example, there is just no viable candidate. So pretty much the remaining Corona, Rancho, Pomona, there is not a viable candidate. As such, we're recommending that it's just left blank. Going on next, the State Assembly District, and that's next in line here. Similarly, we have a bunch of different districts, State Assembly districts in the area. Find your respective race here. So on my ballot, it's District 50, and as such, Robert Garcia is who we're recommending. So similarly, find your respected assembly district and go with the recommendation. Again, as mentioned previous, some of them just have no recommendation because there is no viable candidate. And as such, there's nothing wrong with leaving it blank. Because again, coming back to our highest goal, if it's blank, hey, so long as we're voting, that's the most important thing. Okay, that's our assembly districts. Okay, I hope everybody found it. I'm going to move on. Next, we have city races, and there's lots of different cities here in the IE. Here we have about half of them. Rancho, Fontana, Rialto, Redlands, and Chino Hills, and Rancho. We have a couple of districts up on the docket, and I'll give you an example. In Rancho, we have the incumbents who have met with us, but they refuse to entertain anything divestment. Of course, not ceasefire. They would never entertain ceasefire, but not even divestment related. And as such, we are recommending not to go with the incumbents, but to go with their competitor who has the highest chance. And as such, that's how we arrived here with the Ranchos. But similarly with the other districts as well. Like for example, in Fontana, Jesse Sandoval, he's an incumbent. He's been kind to the community, and as such, we're recommending him as well. And there's a few more cities we have here, I believe. Let's see. Oh, that's it actually. Okay, that was all of our cities that we had. And again, if a city, I'm going to go back to the city page. If a city's not on here, again, that just means that there were no viable candidates that we identified through the city. So I would personally recommend not to vote any of the incumbents because they haven't worked with us, and either leave it blank or move on to a different person. And now in San Bernardino County, there are some other races as well. We have some school board, board of EDUs in some of the San Bernardino County districts. So, Rancho, for example, at Awanda, we have Anwar Abdurrahman, who is running Area 5 in Rancho. Compared to, say, Chino Valley, we have incumbents who have not been friendly to our community. So, for example, we're recommending not to vote for the incumbents in Chino Valley USD, which are Andrew Cruz and James Na. And then similarly, Redlands EDU, we have a couple of districts of people that we're recommending. Now coming back to a few city races in Riverside County, again, lots of cities here, from Harupa to Moval to Paris. And here again, if you're in one of those cities, of course, vote accordingly with that city. And if your city is not on here, again, it just reverts to the previous point that there were no viable candidates identified. And coming back to the bottom here, Fawzia Rizvi, if you're in the Western Municipal Water District, please vote for her. And that's Maha's mom. Okay, lastly, let's see. We have city races, LA County. So LA County, not much in the IE, but we just have LA County here. I'm sorry, Pomona, where D1 we have John Nolte, who's been nice to us. We've met with him, discussed with him a few things. The other two we have District 4 and 6, a few others running. So if you are in that district, I don't think anyone in Pomona was here, but I threw them in just in case. And lastly, with that being said, there's a bunch of propositions on the ballot. We're not endorsing either way any propositions or city measures. There's just there's views going both ways, and as such, we're leaving that up to the individual voters. If you have strong convictions one way, you can do this a quick read through of the propositions and vote whichever way. But there haven't been any suggestions from any Islamic groups that have been put out regarding the propositions or city measures, and as such, we just felt it appropriate to kind of leave it blank. But with that being said, this Friday, so in a couple of days, we have a billboard truck that is going to be running between Ontario. It's going to be starting off at Norma Torres' office at 9 a.m. and working its way through Ontario, Rancho, Fontana, Redlands, and ending up Friday afternoon from 3 to 6 at Pete Aguilar's office. And actually at Jum'ah, it's going to be at the ICCR, Redlands Masjid, there at the conclusion of Jum'ah. So you might be able to see it there. But if you have time, show up to Pete's office, and we'll probably send out the route if you happen to be in the area. So for example, if you're in Ontario, 9 a.m., try to swing by Norma Torres' office, take a picture in front of her office with the truck. Or if you're at Victoria Gardens at the appropriate time, take a picture with the truck. We're sending a message again to these people who have accepted money from AIPAC that they don't support us, and we don't want them in office representing us. And with that said, that concludes the remainder of the presentation here on who to vote for. Please follow us on Muslim Visionaries Global at IG. And with that said, I'd like to thank you guys for attending. I'd like to thank the presenters for presenting with us. And I encourage you all to take your ballot, put it in the envelope, drop it in the mail, and it is complete. Or if you'd like to drop it off at a polling station, you can do that. But with that said, again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us here. And with that, we will conclude the Zoom. Thank you, guys. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Let's see.